Hey everyone, how we doing today? This is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit, and welcome back to another video. And as part of the Ask SplitSuit a Question series, a bunch of people asked hand history questions. This one comes from Shane, and Shane just wants me to review this hand played in an online MTT. So let's check it out. Okay, so at this stage in the tournament, the blinds are 500, 1,000. We have 150 big blinds to start. There's a limp. We decide to attack, and totally okay with this. I should also note a couple different things. One, I was not giving any information about payouts or how close we are to money, if we're in the money, any of that kind of information. So unfortunately, I don't know exactly where we are in the tournament, which makes it a little more difficult to give tournament advice, just for the record, for those of you that do send in tournament hands in the future. But I don't have any of that information. I wasn't given it. And also, I was told that everyone is unknown. So I don't know if we just got switched to this table or what it is. All I know is that we have no information on anybody here. So with that in mind, we get called by the blind as well. MP comes along, and here we are. So in this exact situation, MP decides to donk for pretty much pot, and here we go. So like I said, in this situation, I wasn't given any information. We don't have any information on these opponents, and we still have to make some sort of decision. So I'm going to run you through some of the questions that I would ask myself in this situation. First and foremost, I would ask myself what MP is likely to be donk betting here. Just for the record, donk bet is not a derogatory term as much as it sounds like it is. It just means leading into the previous street aggressor. So we were the previous street aggressor. We were the ones that had the aggression pre-flop. He's leading into us now on the flop. Thus, this is a donk bet. So what is he donking? Well, I always like to start by counting the number of nutted combos. So how many combos of hands realistically beat me? Well, I don't think he has pocket jacks. I think if he had that, he probably raises with a preflop, or at least doesn't limp call, which leaves 3 combos of pocket sevens, 3 combos of pocket fours. That's about it. How many combos of ace jack? Well, there's 2 unseen jacks times 4 unseen aces, so we have 8 of those. So 8 plus 6 is 14. We're not looking at a ton of combos of monstrous hands. And if he could have something like 7-4 suited, mind you, there's 2 combos of that exactly, then he could have tons of other hands like 7-8 and probably jack 9, jack 8, all those kind of things as well. So this is kind of the starting point when I'm looking at this kind of situation. Since I don't have any exact information, I like to start by at least knowing how many combos crush me. The next thing I like to consider is what would happen if I raise. So if we were to raise to something like 27,000, is this person going to continue with any second best hands, or are they going to play pretty close to perfect at that point? Now, again, difficult to answer that, but I'm trying to run you through the kind of questions you ask yourself so you can start getting yourself to the answer that is best. So if they had queen jack, jack 10, jack 9 suited, are they going to continue if I raise? Yes or no? What about 5-6, 7x, pocket 8s, any of that kind of stuff? And again, do your best to answer these kind of questions. That will definitely help you when it comes to finding the best play here. The other thing I also ask myself is MP likely to have a tremendous amount of trash in his range? Because remember, there just simply aren't very many combos of big hands here, and possibly even less of them if you don't think he donk bets all sets and all ace-jack kind of hands. So in this situation, if he has a lot of trash, and mind you, he can have trash with things like ace-x, he can have trash with things like gut shots, so varying amounts of equity with that kind of trash. But at the same time, is this someone who we could just call here, they're going to go barrel, and we can just plan to call down and win the pot a lot at showdown? So again, think ahead, create the best possible line you can, and I'm trying to give you all the questions you ask yourself along the way. So in this exact situation, hero decides to call, big blind goes away, go to the turn, middle position decides to fire again for a very, very large size, and hero decides to jam it. So I want to talk about this jam, I want to talk about how to solve for this jam, and I also want to remind you that this is much more complicated in a tournament than a cash game. In a cash game, I can simply just prove it mathematically, good to go, rock and roll. But in a tournament, you also have to consider what your tournament chips are worth. You have to decide whether or not this is worth that risk, and this is where you need that kind of tournament information. Are you in the money yet? Are you close to the money yet? Are you committing ICM suicide? These are things you need to know in advance before you make this shove. So I'm going to teach you how to solve it, especially from the cash game perspective, but when you're a tournament player, remember that you have to consider other factors, and unfortunately I don't have that information to help you make that decision in this exact hand. Okay, so the way that you can see if this is a good versus bad play is to use a fold equity calculator and Equilab. Very, very simple. In Ecolab, I already plugged in our hand, I plugged in the board and the turn as well, and now here we are. And also in the fold equity calculator, I plugged everything in terms of pot size before we shove, how much we have to call, how much we're shoving for, and then the last thing we need to fix is the estimated percent equity when called, and that's what we use Ecolab for. So what we're trying to solve for here is what would this person limp call with preflop, then fire the flop, then fire the turn, and then call our shove with. So which hands do we think he does that with? So let's put in the obvious ones. Let's throw an ace jack, and let's just start with the worst case scenario. Okay, so in that situation, we have a whopping 4% equity. Obviously, we need folds a ton of the time, and if we could expect folds that often, now mind you, we need 71% folds to break, which means we really want folds here like 85% of the time so that we actually make some profit, right? We don't want to risk our entire tournament life on a break-even play here. That probably isn't going to be very good. Let's make sure we actually make some profit with the kind of plays we're making. So this is just going to be a bad jam as played if we're only getting called by hands that crush us. But let's factor in some other stuff. So some other top pairs, let's do that, and Jack-9 suited, and let's just roll with that for the time being. Evaluate that. Now all of a sudden you notice we jump up to roughly 50% equity, and now all of a sudden we don't need any folds to break. So in this situation, let's actually factor in just a couple more things. Let's say that they could have 5-6. I think that's totally reasonable. 7-8, totally reasonable, and 10-9. Again, I think it's very, very reasonable that they could have things like gut shots and stuff. So let's factor, gut shots when they donk the flop, and then of course they could have improved and are now in a value bet mindset. So now we drop down to 38% equity, pop that in there, and now you notice we need folds 31% of the time, which in all actuality means we probably want folds somewhere between 40 and 50%, so there's some some buffer built into there, and we actually get a profitable jam. So whether or not you think this is a good shove is based upon the assumptions you make on MP's range. This is really a hand reading exercise, and again, there's really more to it because it's a tournament, but unfortunately without that info, I can't go into that, unfortunately. So at the end of the day, was this a good play? Well, it's difficult to say without the information. And again, not even information on MP. I mean, we're used to playing against unknowns. That's a common thing to happen. That's not too shocking. But you really have to give the tournament information when you're talking about tournament spots because it's really important to know where you're at, again, in terms of payouts and ICM and all that kind of fun stuff. So again, was Hero's play here good or bad? Tough to say, but another thing you want to consider is Hero could have considered flatting this turn, but you also have to keep in mind that a bunch of rivers are going to be a little tricky, right? Any 5, any 6, any 9, any 10 puts a 4 straight on board. Any board pair, you don't really know where the heck you're at. Any ace or queen, you're, again, still a little confused as well. And you're probably going to end up facing a very large bet, right? This person donked for a pot on the flop. They're coming in for almost pot on the turn. You are definitely going to be facing something like a 75k bet on the river. I would not be shocked to see that if Hero just called here. So jamming can make a little bit of sense in terms of you're taking that option away, but was this best? It's difficult to say. It's really based upon your range assumption. The more that MP would donk the flop with Jack X and still stack it on the turn, and it's not just Ace Jack, the better and better I like this shove. And I know this is going to anger some of you guys, but unfortunately this is what I was given. So MP does call, 10 on the river, and we lose the pot, but no, I don't know what MP had. I wasn't given that in the write-up, unfortunately. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to ask Shane. Hopefully, he'll pop in the comments and let us know what MP peeled off with. But at the end of the day, again, this isn't really about the hand per se. What is important here is understanding what questions to ask yourself on the flop to get yourself on the right train of thought. How to proof the shove on the turn. And again, the most important point is when you're looking at tournament hands, you have to look at everything involved in the tournament. Payouts, how close you are to the money, ICM, all that kind of fun stuff. Without that kind of stuff, looking at a tournament hand is extremely rough because you're missing the key crucial parts of the information. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Shane, thank you very much for the great hand, and if you or anyone else has a poker related hand or question, feel free to send it over to splitsuit.com/send. That's my hand Dropbox and question Dropbox, so feel free to drop anything in there and I'll make sure to get to it in future videos. If you have any questions, same as always, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, good luck out there and happy grinding.